Good morning, Baltimore. Today is Thursday, June 11th, and thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of the Early Birds podcast. I'm your host, Matt Weyrich. He's Josh Tolentino, Baltimore Sun columnist, was double dipping today. Out at Ravens mandatory minicamp in the afternoon before making the trek over to Camden Yards here as we are sitting at the radio booth overlooking what is a rain-soaked infield currently storming. Hopefully first pitch will go off unhitched. It's in about an hour, but the tarp is down. Rain is still falling. So you caught some sunny skies, though, earlier today.
Yeah, not just today, but yesterday, Matt. Double dipping, covering the Ravens up in Owings Mills, then making the trek down here to Camden Yards. The past couple days, it's felt like spring training almost. Obviously, not the temperatures that comes with being down in Sarasota, but definitely had to load up on the sunscreen. And man, certainly caught a lot of action the past couple days at the castle. It's an exciting time, and just for our viewers, the off-season phase, it's in three phases. So after the draft, they have a portion of practices where it's just the rookies. And then over the past few weeks, it's been organized team activities known as OTAs, and that is voluntary workouts. Well, this past few days up in Owings Mill has been mandatory minicamp. We're going to run through attendance, but basically as much as of a full team experience that we can watch. The entire practices were open, and again, exciting time if you're a Ravens fan to be witnessing and just seeing Jesse Minter's full operation kind of come into effect here.
Yeah, the next time the team will be on the field in complete form will be training camp. So this was kind of the last and only glimpse of as much of a full team as can be assembled here in early to mid June. Now, you mentioned attendance here. It was mandatory mini camp. So what players weren't there and what were the reasons that were provided for each of those guys?
Yeah, let's run through a quick list, and I'll start with Zay Flowers. He was a surprise absence because the team, ahead of minicamp, they had a media day on Monday where they essentially go through all their photo shoots and video promos with the team ahead of summer, and he was spotted in those videos. But when practice came around Tuesday and Wednesday, he was not on the field. I will say I don't think there's any worry to have with the team's number one wide receiver. When you think about OTAs, and that part is voluntary, he was at every single session except one when he attended his own graduation in Boston College. So just starting out with Zay, he was not on the field over the past 2 days, but you know what? It gave us a look at some different guys that we'll certainly get into later in the year. So Zay Flowers was not there. Rashad Bateman was not there, and he's been a widely discussed figure amongst the fan base, just given how his tenure has gone here. Well, he's also a new father, so he's dealing with personal issues, which Jesse Minter has alluded to. But Lamar Jackson and Jesse Minter described him as very involved during the offseason. We'll see how that develops as training camp gets closer. And then just, again, running throughout the rest of the list. Day two of minicamp, Elijah Surratt, who had a highlight play on day one, he did not suit up. And then just throughout the rest, offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley, center Corey Bullock. That was a bit of a confusing one. Defensive tackle Nnamdi Madubuike, still dealing with that neck injury. Jesse Minter said it's going to sort itself out. So if you're reading the tea leaves there, you think that he's going to play at some point this upcoming season. Sorting itself out does not allude to the other possibility of retirement. So we've seen the videos from Nnamdi. He looks like he's in great shape. The Ravens strength staff says he's in great shape. And now obviously he had the procedure and is working his way back to the field. According to Jesse Minter, it'll sort itself out. Then Travis Jones also missing John Jenkins. So we've got three interior defensive line missing. Teddy Buchanan, he had a torn ACL late in the season. He has been on the field watching practice, so it's encouraging to see his involvement as he works his way back. And then outside linebacker Adisa Isaac and cornerback Nate Wiggins not on the field. And then there were some veterans who were there and participating in practice, but when 7 verse 7 and 11 verse 11 occurred, guys like Marlon Humphrey, Calais Campbell, some of their veteran defensive players were not as involved in that action, but definitely encouraging that they were there. So to put a bow on the attendance part of this roll call, Jesse Minter did say there's nothing really to worry about, and he is very confident, to use his words, that everyone on the roster, and that includes Nnamdi Madubuike, will be ready for training camp, which starts in late July. I believe that fourth week of July is when the boys are all back in town. And I'll end with this as it pertains to attendance. We had a special guest yesterday in yesterday's practice. Owner Steve Bisciotti. He's got his own personal golf cart, and it's kind of a theatrical scene when he arrives at practice. Driving from his golf cart, gets escorted out onto the field. It was a great sign to see him, just because of how infrequent he is at these practices. Obviously, wants to see things up close for himself. And Jesse Minter shared on Wednesday that Steve Bisciotti spoke to the team, to the coaching staff, and his essential message as players depart on what many view this as summer break. It's not necessarily a break, but they go to their individual homes, might take a vacation before really the start of training camp next month. Steve Bisciotti's message, the owner's message to the team: what would Derrick Henry be doing over these next 5 weeks? Obviously, Derrick Henry in pristine shape. I think if we could all pick someone
a lot worse role models to have.
Yeah,
sure.
an NFL career to have. Derrick Henry coming off a career high 16 touchdowns, still looks as explosive as ever. So that's what Steve Bisciotti, essentially parting words for this team as he attended practice over these past couple days.
Yeah, certainly you'd love to have every single player there, but in the off season is when players line up to have babies, or are dealing with injuries. They've had off-season surgeries, or just are scheduling things that they wouldn't be able to do during the season. So whether the absences are excused or not, you're never really going to get a full 100% attendance, unless apparently you're the San Francisco 49ers, because they canceled mandatory minicamp because of 100% attendance. Brandon Ayuk was not there, but I guess they're not counting him.
He's active on Instagram.
He is not active on the roster, but active on Instagram. That's for sure. So with the Ravens here, Bisciotti being there and kind of having a message for the team, certainly, good vibes all around. I mean, Sam and I talked last week after their OTAs practice about Declan Doyle and the kind of impressions that he's left on some of the offensive players, and Lamar Jackson echoed some of those sentiments today, saying there's going to be a lot of explosiveness in the offense, and talking about how impressed he's been with the playbook and all that kind of stuff. So certainly good vibes. It's June. This is where the good vibes are. But as we continue to move now through the rest of the off season, it's going to turn more and more into a discussion of what is this team going to be capable of in 2026. We're going to get glimpses of how the offense is going to line up and things like that. Personnel on the defensive side, rotating on the edge, all that kind of stuff. Hard to know what it looks like here, as I said, when not everybody's in attendance and they're not hitting in full pads and all that kind of stuff. But certainly with where everything is right now, you can call it a successful mini camp for the Ravens. And now it's just about pulling it all together come July.
Yeah, and basically the biggest observation or takeaway from these practices is, what does a Jesse Minter practice look like, given his newness to this city and what he's trying to correct with last year's fallout. Everyone knows 8-9, no playoffs. Tyler Loops missed. That basically is John Harbaugh's ticket out of town. And here comes in Jesse Minter. What does practice look like? Well, there was a clip that the team produced, and even Craig Albernaz, the Orioles manager, noticed this. And essentially, it's Declan Doyle and Jesse Minter showing Lamar Jackson how to command the huddle. And Lamar points out how he's in year 9, how he's not quite Unk status yet, but he is a certain NFL superstar, an established vet, and just that small detail of how to get in and out of the huddle. It seems elementary, some things that you've
been doing it since he was like 12 years
old.
Yeah,
but to get that reinforced at this level, I think it just shows the attention to detail. And I'll point out a couple of in moment teaching learning moments rather for these players, and how really Jesse Minter has no restrictions. It doesn't matter who you are. Lamar Jackson, longest tenured veteran on the team, a rookie. It does not matter who you are. You're gonna be taught, and you're gonna be taught under how Jesse Minter wants things to be directed. So Mike Preston and I were observing OTA practices a couple weeks ago. And Venga Ioane, very popular name in town, obviously the team's #1 pick as they look to protect Lamar Jackson here in these future coming years, hopefully to keep him upright for many years to come. So Venga Ioane, the Penn State standout, he had a pre-snap penalty and immediately was removed. And Mike Preston, who has covered this team for my fellow colleague and columnist at the Baltimore Sun, he's covered this team this entire existence, and he could not recall the last time that a top pick draft pick committed a mistake and was pulled on the spot and barked at in front of everyone. Obviously there.
And then this happens again, right, today with Mark Andrews.
And it happens today. So you look at, again, status on the team. Venga Ioane, rookie top pick, didn't matter. And then Mark Andrews, a veteran, quintessential example of a veteran leader, captain, has been through many ups and downs throughout this team. Certainly one of the most accomplished pass catchers in franchise history. We can't really, due to some restrictions that the team puts, we can't say exactly what the play was, but there was pre-snap motion involved. So you think that's got to be a factor in what's going on in Mark Andrews' head as, Lamar Jackson perfects the cadence with a couple different centers. But Mark Andrews moves early, pre-snap penalty. Declan Doyle, man. I was standing about like, I'd estimate about 50 yards away. You could hear him clear as day, it barking towards Mark Andrews to get off the field. And again, that's not to say that John Harbaugh didn't have those accountability moments, but to just see just recent examples within a week, from Venga to be punished, with quotes there, and then for Mark Andrews to be the culprit and learner from today's teaching moment. No shortage of accountability thus far from Jesse Minter, and what Craig Albertaz, he even takes note.
Mm-hmm. I mean, pre-snap penalties have been a huge problem for the Ravens for years. It's something fans have clamored about, really wanting to get cleaned up. And, sloppiness was something that was a problem at the end of last year and has been the problem for the Ravens for years now. So to see them here in training camp having accountability right away, addressing the problem as soon as it happens, it might be embarrassing for the player in the moment and frustrating for them that they're not out on the field for these drills. But at the same time, it's one way to certainly bring attention to it and make it a teaching moment and make sure it's not something that slips under the cracks moving forward. So, as we've kind of talked about, you're laying the foundation here for when these moments really matter in training camp, and you have pads on and you're able to really identify what the effort level of a player is and things like that on full speed game moments. But at the same time, the tone has been set here from Jesse Minter, and it's certainly an encouraging one considering the track record that this team has. And it shows that they are, no coach wants to come into a system and bash what the predecessor did. And certainly Jesse Minter hasn't, taken any shots at Harbaugh directly. But at the same time, for him to come in and clearly make a priority of, I know what the problems were here before, and we are going to make sure that those aren't going to be problems for us, is really a nice change of pace, a nice breath of fresh air, really, for the Ravens here as they try to take what has been such promising seasons and rosters on paper that look like Super Bowl contenders and actually turn it into one that can be malleable and work its way through an actual season when the grind happens, when injuries happen, and inevitably there's a lot of frustration that has to be tempered down and directed in a productive way.
Yeah, and one more detail I want to point out is you really kind of dissect just how Jesse Minter practices look like. And I want to credit Sam Cohn, our fellow host on Early Birds. Man, check out his stories. He's been on top of it throughout minicamp. But yesterday, so day one of their 2-day minicamp, Tyler Loop, he goes through a 10-kick warm-up. He made 9 of 10 warm-up kicks. And then he goes 5, and those warm-up kicks are off the tee. So he's basically warming up for the live team session. And then they roll into 11 on 11. That's the full operation. So and he took 5 kicks, made all of them, including his longest attempt from 53 yards. So Tyler Loop, their second-year kicker, big difference, as Sam pointed out, was that last year when Tyler Loop would kick in practice, in full team periods, he would take the kick regardless of the result, basically stay on the field and then just kind of move back, move up wherever the assigned spot is for that specific team period. So these were varying distances between 30 to 53 yards. And after each kick, Tyler Loop and Ryan Eckley, their rookie punter and holder, they would walk off the field, run back to the coaches, and essentially work like they were in full game operation against the clock, setting up, in a timely manner, and even continuing the tradition of Tyler Loop last year working with Jordan Stout, the departed punter and holder, of a quick dap up, right before he takes his swing. So I thought that was a great observation by Sam, because again, you want to imitate, and Jesse Minter spoke about this today, that you want to imitate a game game-like environments, no matter what it is. So even if it's that, again, a small detail, but Jesse Minter certainly staying on top of it, and that extends to his coordinators as they enforce these differences compared to last year's coaching staff.
Yeah, I always feel like the word urgency is like taboo for coaches across sports where they don't want to act like there's any kind of panic. But I do think that showing urgency, even here in June, when the season is months away, of simulating these tight 2 minute drill type situations where knowing that you have to work under a clock and simulating that as much as you can on the practice field, I do think that pays dividends. And being able to acknowledge the fact that we've struggled in these types of moments, and in order for us to come through, we have to be as prepared as we can and simulate that as much as we can off the field, off the game field, in the practice setting. I think is really encouraging, and for the kicking team as well, it's just as important. If the offense is going to be important, so that's something certainly as training camp gets underway in next month, is something I'm going to be looking for as an early sign of like how are they doing in 2 minute drills, because that's often something we do see in the open portion of practices, because they're not necessarily in their kind of like first quarter playbook that they try to establish. When practice is open to the media, you can't say what certain plays are, but certainly they're still going to try to be as guarded as you can. And the best thing you can practice without giving too much away is 2 minute drill, because so often 2 minute drill is just kind of a cluster of it's all offense, it's all throwing, it's all not necessarily design plays that you're kind of having earlier in games, first and second down type plays. So yeah, I do think that for them to have already here to be, they could just send Loop out there and say, got to make 10 kicks. Here's where you're going to line up. Like, take it throughout practice, and we'll see where you're at the end. They could totally do that. Instead, they're like, hey, you're on the clock here. We're going to make sure you're able to do this in a setting where things aren't necessarily just lined up and like they are here in a practice versus a game.
Yeah, and regarding Tyler Lupa himself as a subject on the team, I think everyone obviously is going to remember his missed kick week 18 and just the dramatic moments that followed as John Harbaugh had his arm around Loop as they exited the field, and their playoff fate was sealed, that their season was over. But Tyler Loop had a pretty successful year. He had only 4 missed field goals all season. 3 of them were from 50+ yards, so reliable, but he still has to work on that distance. So overall, again, when you spend a draft pick on a special teams player, as the Ravens have done now in consecutive years, that you really gotta hope that pick hits. And for the most part, he did. And as it pertains to that miss and him really truly putting it behind him, Jesse Minter did reveal that he went over that play, not in detail with Tyler Loop, but just to talk about that as a learning moment, and again, fully put it to bed. And then here's one other bit that Tyler Loop revealed today, is that multiple NFL kickers actually reached out to him and told him everything was going to be all right. So, as it's kind of like their own fraternity, as and they have their annual kicking camps, like Tight End University.
Right.
But yeah, again, for a young rookie kicker who actually, it's been a very eventful offseason for him. He was married, so congratulations to Tyler Loop. But to have that community, from the NFL kicker community, tight knit community, that's gotta mean something for him. And then also meeting with his new coach to truly focus here going into year 2.
Yeah, I mean, to be drafted like he was puts a lot of expectations on a kicker that typically isn't put on a young kicker of his stature, especially to be as a rookie thrown into a high octane offense, one with playoff aspirations, Super Bowl aspirations, and having to make the biggest kick of the year in a situation that he really didn't face throughout most of his rookie season, because the Ravens didn't put him in that situation for most of the season. But unfortunately, they were forced to, and that's what happens. But we'll see how he responds. And obviously, you never want to see a young player crumble in that moment. Hopefully there's no yips there as he goes into year 2 and what is a very critical year for him moving forward. Let's talk about some of the plays that you did see and you are able to talk about from mandatory minicamp here. What were the biggest highlights for you?
All right, man, it's juicy. I think there were several highlight moments, and we noted the attendance earlier. So no Rashad Bateman, no Zay Flowers, and then on day 2, no Elijah Surratt. So that paves way for the rookie pass catchers to have opportunity, unproven but highly successful, in terms of his touchdown rate guy, and Tez Walker. And I think the top highlight has to be from day 1. Lamar Jackson is rolling to his right. He's escaping pressure. and he sees downfield Elijah Surratt, and it was pretty tight coverage from Marquise Robinson, a single man coverage. And man, Lamar just dots a pretty ball, just I mean, it drops into the basket of Elijah Surratt, who he has the nickname Waffle House because he likes to say he's always open. Man, he wasn't necessarily open on that play, but Lamar put it in the most ideal, perfect spot it had to be right there. The team put out a social clip, and I've seen a lot of fans, if you just look at the replies, for them to zoom out because it's truly only focused on the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to the team wanting to prevent them not revealing too much about the specific sequence,
Sure.
showing what the defense was, showing what the exact offensive play was. The play is, or the camera rather, it literally goes from Lamar, it pans the ball the entire way until it lands into Surratt's hands right in front of the pylon too. So could have been a touchdown in a real game. That by far was my number one highlight. And you think about the rookie competition between Jacoby Lane and Surratt, very similar bodies. I'd say right now, and again, it's very early, but I think Surratt has a hold of that, between those two. And clearly the depth chart is not settled with guys missing. And, I think there's argument that they could even add a veteran to that room before training camp or during training camp. But certainly one of the top highlights, in my opinion. There were certainly some others that we'll get into, but man, just seeing number 8 spin that ball, even in June, it's a beauty to behold.
Oh, I know. I mean, he's a hell of a player, and putting it, like you said, in a spot where Surratt wasn't necessarily open to put it there. I do think making my take from after the draft look good of Surratt is going to be the rookie that stands out between him and Jalen Lane, but it's encouraging to see him being targeted in that kind of situation, getting the kind of look where when the season begins, Surratt's going to have trust for Lamar Jackson to throw the ball in that situation, try to put it there in a place where only he can get it. That requires a certain amount of rapport between QB and receiver. So for him already to be getting those kinds of looks there, it's training camp. This is what it's for. This is when he would get those looks, but obviously comes down with the ball. So a great play for him.
Yeah, and on Surratt, one thing that you love about his resume and throughout college is he's got the big game experience. Obviously, shout out to
playing at JMU.
Yeah, there you go. And before the big one, shout out to our managing editor Jay Judge. I know he'll love this, but with Surratt and Indiana winning the national title, I mean, you can't replace those big light game experience for Surratt, and that's not necessarily what gives him the edge, but just based off what we've seen from these two practices, he's had more reps. Certainly, I mean, obviously he missed day 2, but for him to maximize the reps that he had on day 1, I think puts him just slightly edge over Jacoby Lane, who had some highlight moments himself with a couple catches over the past couple days. But just to run through some other highlights, and I'll preface this by saying they're in shorts and jerseys and t-shirts, jerseys, but obviously without pads, and you got to think about they're also trying to not cause any injuries, and that was a big thing that Jesse Minter talked about today, was the restrictions, playing at full speed while knowing the restrictions. So you got to think, if you are a pass rusher or really any offensive line, defensive line, it's got to be tough to show your full potential, your 100%, to put on quality tape during these practices, given those limitations. But I still think we saw a lot of effort from many of these guys. And one guy that flashed for me was Tavius Robinson. And certainly he's a 4th-year vet. And before he was injured last year, suffered a lower body, I believe it was an ankle injury last year that kind of stalled his momentum. Man, he was every bit as explosive, and the Ravens finished with only 30 sacks, third fewest in the NFL. But if Tavius Robinson didn't get injured last year, I think he would have contributed a handful more. Again, it's hard to count sacks per se because they're not going to let
Lamar get hit.
Yeah, they're not going to let Lamar get hit. And when he does get close to being contacted by these defensive players. There's some instances where coaches will just let the play go on for the offensive progression to
Mm,
see its way through as this offense gets used to a new system. But I will say, before they blew that whistle, or in the instances where they allowed the play to be extended, Tavius Robinson was a constant back there. And we'll tie that into position battles, because everyone's wondering who's going to be the other man on the other side of Trey Hendrickson.
mm.
That competition involves Tavius Robinson, Mike Green, the second year pass rusher, and Zion Young, the rookie. And certainly, I don't, in my opinion, solely, I think it's going to be sort of a mixed bag in terms
Mhm.
of that. I would not surprise me at all if Jesse Minter ends up using some sort of rotation to keep legs healthy, because Jesse Minter famously says, and you're going to hear this a lot, Ravens fans, he wants the Ravens to be at their best when their best is needed. So rotating fresh legs there from that trio on the opposite side of Trey Hendrickson could be the formula to go. And then another note on Trey Hendrickson, a lot of fans are curious on Trey. To no surprise, man, he's been the ideal definition of a veteran in every sense of the way. He's the first up to lead them in position drills, and just the way that he goes through the drills, it looks a little bit different to the other guys, and you can just see that in his body movement and just how he operates. And one more thing is that Mike Green and Zion Young, they are always, by default, they're always going to be next to Trey Hendrickson. But I'm talking about even in the break periods, when guys are resting or stretching or getting, a Gatorade or a drink. These guys are always soaking up information from Trey Hendrickson, and from, by all accounts, it looks like he's been willing to share any information that they're seeking.
Yeah, I mean, Tavius Robinson, I think there's been a lot of talk about Mike Green and his potential, and obviously Zion Young being a second round pick. There's very high expectations for him, but I would not be surprised if Tavius Robinson is kind of, on the first draft of what their depth chart looks like. He'll be the opposite outside linebacker to Trey Hendrickson, and then it's going to be up to one of the younger guys to prove that they deserve snaps over him. I mean, not to say that he's a boring pick, but he's certainly a guy that you kind of know what to expect when he is healthy. And certainly that is a higher floor right now than what Mike Green or Zion Young have, just because there is no floor for either of those guys at this point in their career. So for the way that this group will shake out, I mean, you need more than two edge rushers to get through a game. There's going to be opportunities even after the game start. And if those guys are technically the two backups for Green and Young, there's going to be opportunities for them to make impacts on games and earn more snaps throughout the season. But I would not be surprised if we see a lot of Tavius Robinson early. And also, I want to say I did say call Jacoby Lane Jalen Lane, and that's because I've been thinking about the Commanders, which that's my team. Sorry. And he's one of their backup wide receivers on there. So mix up those two names. But
Well,
don't no disrespect to Jacoby Lane, who we talked about last episode in his spending spree with his rookie contract.
look at Matt's dedication to our early bird viewers, just on-site corrections. But
I think I actually follow the Ravens now more than I do the Commanders, which it hurts to do a little bit, but it's the job, and this is an exciting team, so can doesn't hurt to follow along.
yeah, and you just to get back on track here with Tavius Robinson, you mentioned him as not a sexy pick, but your pick, just given his experience and what he's shown when he's healthy. Did you see the video? Yes, I know you've been busy at always, but did you see the video that the team put out from Media Day involving Tavius
I
Robinson?
didn't know.
Okay, so essentially, just for our viewers, and you can check this out on the Ravens' socials. So when you enter the facility to get to the practice fields and in front of the media house, where that's our work area, you pass through the atrium, and that's actually just to I feel like a common point to get everyone in tune with what the atrium is. When Jesse Minter was hired as Ravens head coach, and this was a popular video that surfaced when he entered the facility, every single employee was in the atrium, filled in that area. So that's the room that I'm referencing here. So now they've decorated the atrium with their 4 new uniforms. So each 4 uniform is stationed there on a mannequin. So there were 3 mannequins, and then Tavius Robinson actually replaced one of them, and
Classic.
in that classic, yeah, exactly. So acted like he was a frozen figure, and as players, and that's actually where they did the photo setup for media day in that area, so players had to report there to take their headshots and any other promos that the team put out. Tavius Robinson acted as a mannequin, and I thought it was a funny bit. But they don't just pick anyone for those things. So maybe there is
Well,
hype.
mannequins must be pretty big if he's
They
able
are,
to like
yeah.
disguise as a mannequin.
And he definitely got some players, including Lamar Jackson and just other various team employees. So again, they don't just pick anyone to. Again, he's got to be a big guy, but football team, most of them are pretty
Pretty
big.
big guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so for them, maybe that hints at a peak at that competition. They're definitely spicing him up, hyping him up.
There we go. Getting him
ahead of the
involved in the
season.
social game. I love to see it. You mentioned position battles here, and we obviously just talked about kind of the edge rusher situation, but wanted to close out the show here looking at a couple of different position groups here that are not settled. Let's start at punter. You were pretty impressed with what you saw from Ryan Eckley. Is that right?
Yeah, Ryan Eckley. So it's a two-man competition, and you got to think that the draft capital spent, he's got to have the advantage. I mean, they used the sixth round pick on him, and day three picks can hit in the long run for teams based on individual development. So for them to devote a draft pick to, again, a special teams player in consecutive years after they used one on Tyler Loop, that kind of shows a lot about their stance already on Eckley. So Ryan Eckley, just a quick scouting report on him before we get into his performance. He was at Michigan State last year and led all of FBS with, I believe it was 48.5. That was best in college average net punt yards. So he already comes in with a draft capital and
Booming leg.
and a booming leg. Man, that booming leg was on display these past couple of days. He boomed a handful of 60+ yarders in Tuesday's practice, and then on Wednesday we had ourselves a punting competition, Matt. And so essentially, and here's another part, is that Eckley had 2 additional reps over Luke Elziniga. Elzinga. I don't want to have too many mispronunciations there. So there were 10 swings from Eckley and then 8 from Elzinga. And I will say Elzinga had the longest kick between the two of them, but between their individual reps, so I counted 8 from Elzinga and 10 from Eckley. Eckley was by far more consistent, and there were a couple coffin corner punts where he landed them inside the 10, and with impressive hang times too. Go check out my observations, which I wrote with Sam Cohn. You can check out over at Baltimore Sun. I documented their hang times with my personal stopwatch. So very unofficial times, but man, Ryan Eckley, he was certainly impressive. And you know what? You got to be impressive, and it's a lot of pressure to replace an All-Pro in Jordan Stout, who departed with John Harbaugh in free agency to New York.
There were few drills when I played high school football that were more hyped than the punting competition at the end of practice when everybody on the team would be in a semicircle and you'd have the 2 kickers go up and trying to land punts inside the 5, 10, 20-yard line. And I'm sure it's not the same as Oklahoma drills, but it does have a little bit of juice there, as the team being able to pin a team inside the 5-yard line with a perfect punt. It's kills a drive before it begins, obviously super important. And so everybody kind of recognizes that during these competitions. And I agree, Eckley is definitely the inside track guy here. I'd be shocked if
And
he doesn't end up
Elzinga
being
has
there.
not played in the NFL. Last year he went undrafted out of Oklahoma State.
Mhm.
One of the Oklahomas.
Yeah.
Went undrafted, had a rookie minicamp invitation to the Indianapolis Colts, and
Mhm.
has never kicked in the NFL. So again, just given the
Keep going.
given the draft compensation allotted to 6th round rookie Ryan Eckley, you got to think Eckley has the that competition under his wraps as Matt adjusts the audio in this press box suite here at Camden Yards. Let's focus on another competition that is going on, and that is center. And this is a big one because you're replacing an All-Pro, Pro Bowl type player in Tyler Linderbaum, who now just became the highest paid center in NFL history, going to the Las Vegas Raiders. Man, I think this is Danny Pinter's job to lose. He's handled all of the like how I mentioned how Trey Hendrickson leads the defensive edge position in drills. Danny Pinter is always the first center up in these individual drills and reps under Dwayne Ledford, their new offensive line coach. Up next has been Javon Gwynn, a 4-year veteran. And then I mentioned earlier at the top of the show, there's no Corey Bullock. So Jesse Minter did he didn't get into each individual absence, but he eventually summed them all up in one as nicks and bruises. So
Mhm.
whatever Corey Bullock is doing, you hope that he can get healthy because man, he was impressive last year in training camp, and um, also has local ties, so you root for local rise stories such as that. Went to University of Maryland, but he has not been here over the past couple days. And again, it feels like it's Danny Pinter's job to lose if the Ravens don't explore any other external additions.
Yeah, I still think external moves are on the table here for the Ravens, particularly at center. I mean, I'd imagine they're going to want to get a look at Corey Bullock in that situation. Javon Gwynn wasn't a guy we talked about a ton pre-draft about a possible player at the center spot, but certainly is going to get a look too. So they have some internal options. I do think at the end of the day, they're going to make some kind of move. I don't know. There's a lot of time still left before the start of the season, but right now, as you say, Danny Pinter is probably has the inside track there. Last thing, Josh, before we get out of here, is we are starting to hear a lot of audio coming in from the stadium, wide receiver room. Anyone standing out to you as far as the depth there behind Zay Flowers?
Yeah, let's not sleep on Tez Walker. And, there's certainly a spot to take there. I think we've talked about this so many times with the production from this pass catching unit last year, where it was Zay Flowers and it was a huge drop off to the next group of pass catchers. Tez Walker, he's been impressive, and he could have finished a mini camp a bit on a stronger note, but I still think the body of work over the past 3-4 weeks has been pretty strong. And obviously that comes with an absence with Rashad Bateman, but we saw Tez Walker come up with. I want to say everything's a huge catch, and shout out to our boy Nick Shook from NFL Network who joined us. He shares an alum with Tez Walker, their roots to Ohio, but man, Tez Walker had some highlight plays throughout OTAs and in minicamp, but man, there were two plays today where Lamar threw a 50-50 ball to Tez. And I'll just detail the first one because that's the one that I can remember most vividly. It happened right in front of me along the left sideline. So Lamar throws up a 50-50 ball. It's about a 45-50 yard pass attempt traveled through 50 yards in air distance. And you as the ball's coming down, you can see Tez Walker kind of get into that basketball box out. Carl Anthony Towns. I want to let's do a comparison to Victor Wembanyama because I actually looked up their heights. Tez Walker's 6'1" and Marquise Robinson is 6 foot.
I think you're about to compare him to Wemby. I'm like,
no,
the
no,
height's a little bit different.
No, all right. So all right, two big guys, boxing out. And I thought for a moment when as the ball's hitting its apex and starting to come down, that Tez Walker had a good grasp on Marquise Robinson boxing him out. And Marquise Robinson played with great technique, and at the last moment, he was able to get his arm in there, and Tez Walker wasn't able to come down with that ball. That would have capped off a great offseason workout in terms of the overall production from Tez Walker. But again, you got to think one of the rookie receivers is going to pop. My pick and your pick seems like Surratt. We'll see what Jacoby Lane can offer once training camp arrives, but that's certainly another position battle to watch. And just to wrap it all up, we talked about this earlier, but who's going to rush the passer on the opposite edge of Trey Hendrickson? Ultimately, I think it's going to be a mix of guys between Zion Young, Mike Green, and Tavius Robinson. Certainly, the Ravens know that there's a lot of work to be accomplished after getting just 30 sacks last season.
Yep. That's Josh Tolentino. That was Ravens mandatory minicamp, putting a bow on it as we now move into what is probably the biggest dead period of the NFL offseason.
Summer break.
Don't worry, we're going to get creative with some podcast segments for you guys here in the coming weeks. Looking forward to that. Josh, any final words for the good people?
Man, what would Derrick Henry be doing over these next 5 weeks? I'm kind of stuck on Steve Bisciotti's message. Well, for myself, I'm going to be covering the Orioles for a good bit of the stretch leading into training camp, but I will say with, Orioles being later in the day, in terms of their availability. So like today, Craig Albanez spoke around, I think it was 3:45.
Mm-hmm.
Ravens practice was at 12:15. I'm gonna try waking up earlier, and I Derrick Henry, shout out to Sam Cohn again, who did a great profile on Derrick Henry's workouts that you have to go through his archive, but check that out from last year. Derrick Henry's an early riser, so maybe over these next few weeks I'm gonna try to straighten up the sleep schedule. We've got so many late nights at the ballpark that waking up past 8:30, 9 o'clock is acceptable in baseball.
I always say
terms.
baseball's a night job, so if I sleep until 10 a.m. On occasion, that's going to happen. But we want to thank you all so much for listening. Appreciate you guys hopping on with us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give the show 5 stars over on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, wherever you guys get your podcasts.
Share with a friend, share with a family member. We appreciate the growth as we episode 34?
34, I believe.
Yeah.
Make sure you give us a follow on social media as well. That's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And we're posting YouTube shorts too. We're everywhere, man. Wherever you guys want us, we are there. So thank you all again so much for listening, and have a good one.